So what we're going to do today is another couple of lids. We'll do lids and galleries as well. I just want to show you a few different types of lids first. And as I said the other week, there's lots and lots of lids. So think about the lid you're wanting to do, because that will influence and inform the pot you make, the rim of the pot, and the actual lid you go to make. So there's some that are just thrown as a normal pot with a normal rim on it. And if you've just got a straightforward rim, then you'll use something called a flange, and that's a little raised area on this. This is a really simple flanged lid because it's thrown basically just as a little cylinder, and then that means when it sits in, this little flange here is going to stop the lid from shearing off of the top. There's other types, really simple lids where again you have a little raised, it's like a little raised cylinder for a lid, and the lid itself is just basically a very simple cylinder that sits onto that to stop from shearing off. Here's another example of that. This is quite clearly just a very little flat bottomed cylinder, very short cylinder. You can make them higher, so you could have a much higher lid that also works as if you wanted a water jar and something to drink out of. If this was slightly higher, then you could use this as something to pour into, to drink out of. So think about the functionality of the piece, but again, a very simple lip on the rim of this pot. There's also galleries, and galleries are the recess, and so it's recessed inside here. So it's where the lip of the piece has been almost split in half, taken down, and then that little disc inside there is the gallery where this lid will sit onto. This lid has been thrown with a flange, and the outside of the lid fits onto the gallery, and the flange on the inside sits inside the lid, inside the rim of the gallery rather. You don't need to have a gallery and a flange, although it is quite useful if you've got a larger teapot. For when you're tipping and pouring, it means the flange holds the lid in place so it doesn't fly off when you tip. But on a storage jar, it's not really that necessary. This was just an example. There's also, this is one of the lids that I threw the other week. So it's that basic little bowl shape that you've thrown, but I'd left some weight on the bottom and turned the actual knob into it. And this is just a really simple lid that was thrown off of the hump. And again, in this little teapot, there's a gallery inside, and this little lid just fits straight into there. I didn't put a flange on this lid like I did on that one. Even though this is a teapot, this is more of an ornamental piece rather than practical. It can pour and it can function, but this one is very small, so it's not really necessary. I'm not going to be using it as an everyday piece. But always have a look at lids and galleries, flanges, to see exactly what kind of piece it is that you want to make. So what I'm going to do today is, first of all, two different types of lids. I'm going to do a basic little flanged lid that will sit inside a piece, and also a very small basic drawn out cylinder. It's like a ginger jar lid. And I've already thrown a piece earlier this morning, and so nice bellied form, and it's just got that straight rim going up here. So that means I can either get a lid straight on the top or a flange that will sit on the inside. So that was thrown with about 1.5 kilos of mixed toasted and earthstone clay. So I'm going to use the same mix of clays for my lids. So I've got about roughly 400 grams of clay here. This might be a little bit more than I actually need, but I'd rather have more clay and subtract some rather than have too little and then end up making my lid too thin and it's not really going to work properly. So as you do normally, adhere your blade to the wheel head and cone up and centre. Plenty of water. Cone up the clay and then centre it down. And repeat this just to loosen the clay up slightly and make sure there's no twists in the clay. It's really nicely centred. So first of all, I'm going to do one of these little lids. So it's just drawing straight out. I'm going to show you how to do a flange on the outside. Important thing to do first of all is to measure the lid that you're going to be fitting it to. So I want to measure the inside of this jar. I'm going to measure this part on the inside here. Oops. Because this is where the flange is going to sit on the inside of here. So roughly about there. I'm going to check that. You need to keep checking and checking and checking whenever you're doing lids, but that's a rough guide to begin with. So I'm going to treat this as if it's just a very basic cylinder. So I'm going to put my finger in, then draw the clay towards me. Still want to pay attention to certain areas like compressing the base of your piece so it's nice and flat and it's compressed and it's not waterlogged at all. I'll use my calipers just to see how far I need to draw out. So that's just about right, because I'm going to take down from here and press down with a tool, and this is the part that's going to leave me a raised flange. So I'm going to use a flat-ended wooden tool and holding my finger on the inside just to steady it. On the outside I'm going to begin to press down with that wooden tool. And you can see here that I'm beginning to expose this flange here. I'm going to draw it up ever so slightly just to thin it out a little. It doesn't need to be quite as tall as that, so you could make it shorter, but the taller it is, the more secure it's going to be on when it sits inside the rim of your piece. Pressing down on the outside. I'm pressing down here to cause a little groove. So I now have an ever slight groove down here with the lid raising up slightly at the side here. That's also going to secure it onto the side here. The lid is going to come over the side and the flange is going to go inside. The good thing about throwing on bats when you're doing lidded jars is you can actually take your lid off, turn it upside down, and you can check to see if it's going to fit properly. Now I could see that I could pull out this flange a little bit further. So I'm going to pop it back on and draw this flange out just a little bit more. So just pulling with my finger outside. You want to make sure it's nice and straight as well, so it sits easily on the inside of your piece. And again, I'm going to check this. The only thing you want to make sure is they don't stick when you put them on the inside. So I can see that is practically perfect sitting on there now. So this will then sit in like that other lid. You have to leave this to dry before you can put it inside to check, because if you put it in at the moment when it's wet, it's going to stick there and it'll seal and you'll never be able to get it back off again. You'll only be able to rip it off. So you need to put these both aside to dry for a little while. I'm just going to tidy this one up ever so slightly. Tidying up the bottom of it just here. And again with my chamois, just softening off the edge of that flange there and the edge of the lid. Take away some of that excess clay that's sitting there. Tidy it up again. And then that's my little drop-in lid that sits with a flange. So that's basically will be, oops, it's this. So sitting on there like that. On this one, I've attached a little knob onto the top of it. You can do that afterwards when you're taking it off the bat and it's gone leather hard. But if you've got a little lip on the edge of it like this, it does come off quite easily just picking it up. So this is more ornamental than anything else. So you can leave it with or without a little knob. So now I'm going to show you how to do one of these little ones. And this is one that's going to sit on the outside of the pot. So put another bat on the wheel. And again, doing these on bats means that you can take them off, check whether you need to adjust it slightly. And this really helps you get a really close fit, a tight fit on your lid. And that's what you're looking for. You don't want it to be too tight, because if there's any distortion or warping when it goes in for firing, especially at stoneware, the lids can stick together. So you want to give yourself a little bit of leeway, but you don't want it rattling about on the top of your jar, ideally. You've got to remember that when you're throwing with a wooden bat, you want to moisten, wet the top of your bat slightly, because if it's too dry, the clay will just pop off. Bang your clay down and cone up and centre as usual. So that's nicely centred. So what I'm going to do with this lid, it's just a very, very basic short cylinder. So again, finger in, don't go down too deep, but you want about a centimetre, maybe a little bit less than a centimetre. And then draw straight towards yourself. Remember and compress and consolidate the base of your piece. And I'm almost there. That's the inside, so you need to check where the outside of your pot is. So this time I'm taking the measurement from the outside just here, so you want the lid to fit over there. So you can see on here I need to draw it out just a little bit further. And then I'm going to draw up the walls as I would a normal cylinder. So pinching and drawing up, compressing and consolidating on the rim, pinch at the bottom, draw up towards your nose like you would do a normal cylinder. I'm going to keep this one relatively short. So I'm going to compress down the bottom. And again, because this is on the bat, I can take this, turn it upside down to check on my pot. Oops. This needs to come out just a little bit more. I'm just going to pull out to the right hand side just a very little bit. Hopefully that should do. And it's important to throw your lids and your pot at roughly the same time because of the shrinkage rates. As soon as this begins to dry, it will begin to shrink, so that's going to alter the circumference and diameter of your piece. So they should be at relatively the same kind of state. I dried this one off a little bit, but they were still thrown within like an hour of each other, so they're going to be relatively at the same state. That's a bit big now. This is where it's good that you've got them on bats. You can fiddle around, draw them out, take them back in again. Just press this back in. That's roughly about the right size. So what I do with this one now is leave it to dry ever so slightly. I'm going to soften off the rim of it, and again take away your excess down here. And as with this lid, I'm going to use a wiggly wire to cut it off. So I don't really want to turn anything off of this. I want to do as little to this piece as possible, but I'm going to use the wiggly wire to give it a little bit of texture on the top. So they are two very simple lids for the same pot. So that's just different ways of approaching lids. As I say, a wealth of lids to do, and I'll keep doing a few more every week. Thank you.